venue marketing, as you've heard, and she's going to be running a course actually for venues. It's going to be done remotely, so you, like all courses at the moment, so but for you and your team, you can sign up, and there'll be details of that in a week or two's time, so keep looking at that in the collective.hostology.co.uk. There'll be, I think, weekly sessions where your team can log in perhaps an hour a week and just get some more tips on show rounds and all sorts of other ideas. And obviously Kelly has a brilliant perspective because talks to many different venues. So look out for Kelly's sessions there. Okay, brilliant. So I think I'm going to introduce Josh Dugdale, one of my hostology colleagues. Are you there, Josh? And perhaps we can bring you into the onto the stage. We got Josh there?
Yep, he should be coming in a second.
Okay, great. Brilliant. And for those of you that are not logged in here, welcome to those of you that are watching on the live stream. So it should be going live in a minute. Okay.
We are
brilliant.
live now, just to let you know.
Great, thanks, Ruby. Big thanks to Ruby, who's been brilliant at promoting and demoting people. She holds all the power. Hello, Josh. We can see your name, but not your face. Give him a second. Possibly brushing his hair. But thank you to everyone who's joined the sessions today, and in fact the last 2 weeks. It's been really interesting. We're going to be joined after the session actually back with Ben and Dugdale, so do hang around for that. We've got a few closing thoughts. But hello, Josh.
Hi, Emma. Can you hear me?
Yeah, your volume's sounding good.
Excellent.
Yeah, I like the way you've got a sort of rustic background, almost sort of panelled.
Well, that's kind of how we roll in the countryside here.
Are you in the Wazing sauna?
Not yet. That's all to come. But really excited to be here and looking forward to the next session.
Brilliant.
And yeah, I think it's been really good so far, actually.
Excellent. And do we have our special guest? Are we on time with that? Or
I think we're waiting.
Okay.
I'll just check with Ruby to see where we're at.
I mean, what we could do, if we've got to wait a few minutes, we could, one of the things we didn't manage to play earlier because we had such engaging panels that overran a little bit, is our Gusto ad. If you wanted to play that, Ruby, while we wait for the Secretary of State. These politicians, they're always late. Is he late? I don't know.
Yeah, the Gusto thing is great, actually. We've decided to give it out. Everybody who comes to Wazing for any event, we're giving them a free can of Gusto on the basis that I think it's quite a good way of looking after our clients. Mm-hmm. So we're excited about that, actually. I think it's got quite a big future. So brilliant.
Okay, yeah, I think Ruby's going to play us the Gusto ad, which we didn't have time for earlier, but we're grateful to Gusto for giving away so many cases of this new immune boosting drink. So I think we've got a few words from them now.
Hi, I'm Will from Gusto, and I'm really excited today to tell you about our 2 new drinks, Super DC. They're super quantities of vitamin D, of vitamin C, plant-based, packed with vitamins. We've got vitamin K, vitamin A, folic acid. Stars of the show are vitamin D, that's vegan vitamin D, 200% your reference intake in 1 can. Vitamin C, 2,500% your reference intake. That's a mother load of vitamin C to help fight oxidative stress. Both of these drinks contain plant extracts. We've used white mulberry, acerola cherry, and elderberry extract, packed full of anthocyanins. These plant ingredients also provide plant-based vitamin C, which your body digests slower than conventional vitamin C. We buy our blood oranges direct from a farm on Mount Etna, and they taste absolutely exquisite. They themselves are full of vitamin C as well. This is your one a day. It's a wonderful one a day, a delicious drink to have at breakfast. Give yourself a little vitamin bump and actually get through the winter with a smile on your face.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. I still haven't tried one, Josh.
Well, we
got my address.
We need to get you some. Yeah,
looks good.
So no sign of Kwasi yet, but I think I'm looking forward to the session because I think it's a great opportunity to ask him some key questions.
Yeah,
it's been interesting actually seeing all of the different events that have been on during the summit, and some of the questions that have arisen from it. And I guess one of them is where the wedding sector is best placed, and how what's the best way of being able to lobby government. So I think that's something that we definitely need to discuss.
Yeah, Ruby's saying actually, if Kwasi, if you are on our participants list, could you just put your hand up, which I think you can do at the bottom of the screen, raise your hand, and we can find you in case it's just your phone number showing. That'd be great. There is somebody with just a number, so that might be it. Okay, yes, no, I agree. And I think some of the interesting discussions that we had yesterday will be really interesting to talk about. So Carl Creswell, who works obviously with Kwasi Kwarteng in Bays, just hearing from him about the levels of detail and how the wheels move was really interesting, and how you make your voice heard in government where there are so many cross currents of different sort of priorities and bits of information that need to be understood.
Oh, I think we've just had a message from Paul Scully saying, does Kwasi need a panelist link?
No, he just needs, that's fine. He just needs the participant link and we'll promote him.
Great.
Oh, sorry. Is somebody replying? Brilliant. Should we ask Paul some questions as well while he's there? Hi, Paul.
The joys of Zoom. Excellent.
Oh, great. He's here. Hello. Hello. Okay, brilliant. Well, listen, I'm going to duck out, and very good luck to both of you. I hope you have a really good chat, and talk to you afterwards. Okay.
Thanks, Emma.
Sorry I'm late. We've had some IT issues, but I'm here, and I'd like to thank Josh and others also for organising this event. I'm here with Paul Scully, and the reason we're both here is because we know that not only from a social point of view, but also from an economic point of view, the weddings industry is really important, an important part of how we live, who we are, and also has a huge economic impact. And more importantly, actually, than the economic contribution, it's the fact that the people who want to get married, who want that commitment, who want to have a special day, are being very adversely affected by the current circumstances we're in. And it's not just about the people who want to get married themselves. We're fully aware, I'm fully aware, having only got married actually in December 2019, what a special time it is for families and friends. We're also very conscious, I'm certainly conscious as Secretary of State, that your particular sector, that the wedding industry, has been very adversely affected by COVID-19. That's one of the things I've learned in my 2 months as Secretary of State, is that the pandemic that we're living through has affected different sectors very differently. I was the energy minister. I was lucky enough to be an energy minister for nearly 2 years. And by and large, many participants in that sector have weathered the storms of COVID from a financial point of view quite effectively. Other sectors, I think notably the hospitality sector, of which you're a part, and aviation, to take another sector, have been really, really badly hit. And as Secretary of State, I'm very conscious of that. All I would say before handing back to you, Josh, or perhaps inviting Paul to come in, is that we are completely aware of the difficulties. I was very pleased that the Prime Minister came up with the roadmap, which gives us a good clarity in terms of dates. I'm also happy to say that all the evidence I've seen, all the data I've seen, suggests that we will stick to those dates. Obviously, there's got to be some flexibility given the fact that we don't know what the coronavirus will do. But I think in terms of vaccine rollout, in terms of the effectiveness that we see of the vaccine, in terms of hospitalization rates, there's no reason that I can see why we won't be able to stick to those dates. And very lastly, I would say that there was a measure of support in the Chancellor's budget And I fear I feel rather that it was a generous amount of support. Obviously, we're always going to be reviewing the situation, but I think that I'd like to think, I dare to hope that we've gone through the worst of this, and I'm fully expecting that the economy can reopen in, I think, about less than 3 months' time now. But that's all I wanted to say. I mean, I'd be very happy to hear questions. Paul, do you want to say anything in particular?
Well, Josh, I think we met before, and on calls before, and we're keenly working on making sure that we get the guidance for weddings that can take place in stages 2 and 3. Secretary of State's already talked about the desire to get, as the Prime Minister talked about in his Facebook Live earlier at the beginning of the year, pitched as normal by the summer. That's the event research programme is very much doing that in terms of breaking down events and weddings into their component parts and looking through with the feed-in that we've already had from the wedding sector, laying those side by side to make it a COVID secure event as we start to lift the social distancing measures when possible. And I share the Secretary of State's optimism. We were vaccinating 27 people a second on Saturday. So we're cracking on with this, but we've just got to be steady and sure, because I know you guys have been so hard pushed, but for so many of the other areas of the economy, stop, start has been equally a big pressure on them. So we want to, as the Prime Minister says, make sure that we're sort of exchanging haste for certainty, and so we can progress on. But I know it's tough.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you both of you for attending, and Paul, it's a pleasant surprise to have you with us as well, because I know you've been very involved with the wedding sector. And Secretary of State, thank you for your time in this. I guess the first question, which I think is on the minds of many people, is there is a feeling, and perhaps justifiably, because it's taken a while for the wedding sector to pull itself together and to be able to speak with one voice. But there is a feeling that the wedding sector is seen as a little bit of an afterthought. And you see, how pubs and restaurants have certainly had, support from the Treasury. And sometimes wedding venues or the wedding sector has been forgotten. Maybe the VAT rate with 5%, which wedding venues are excluded from. And I suppose the first question really should be, what can you do to ensure that weddings aren't forgotten about?
I'll just say very briefly that clearly some sectors, and this is reflecting my experience as an MP, as a junior minister, now Secretary of State, some sectors are very well organised, and they've got very effective lobby groups, and they can make a direct representation to relevant ministers. And I'm not making any individual direct points, but other industries have really used COVID to try and speak with one voice, as you've suggested. But I don't agree that we've overlooked the wedding sector. I mean, as constituency MPs, people often forget that ministers are constituency MPs. And as constituency MPs, we're directly involved in the lives of our communities. We're directly involved in listening to people. And I can assure you that in my mailbag, I get huge amounts of correspondence about weddings, about being able to celebrate that special day with loved ones. And it's not a sector that we're forgetting about. I don't see that at all.
I guess the question, and I know there's been tremendous lobbying towards government on the issue of the wedding sector, and understandably, because it's such an important piece in people's lives. I mean, getting married, obviously, it's not just the bride and groom,
Absolutely.
But families, and it's a very intense life moment, and it's culturally, it's significantly important. And I guess, there is a sense that it's difficult to fit in the wedding sector into the different departments. Perhaps there's been a little bit of is it with BEIS, is it with DCMS? We're now firmly with BEIS. And I guess the ask is that you take us very, very seriously. I mean, the sector is worth 14 billion. Culturally, it's really, really important. And I guess the ask is that you will represent us and be the leaders that we need and represent us to Treasury and to the government. Absolutely,
that's why I hear. I mean, I noticed in the chat what someone's saying, just because someone shouts louder doesn't mean they're more important. That's absolutely right. But it does make an impact also ministers being able to be exposed to the sector in the way that we are. The fact that you've got 2 ministers here, I think, is significant. And there's no way, if there has been neglect in the past, there's no way that going forward that's going to happen. I think you've got really good champions. We've got good dialogue. I think Paul has worked extremely hard to maintain contact with you. And going forward, I think we'll have a very good, strong dialogue, which I think will help the industry. And we're completely aware of the fact that this industry, not only from an economic point of view, but also from a social point of view, a mental health point of view, across so many factors, is a really, really important part of our general well-being.
It's been interesting, Josh, the journey towards this, because it was a standing start, really, I suppose, our engagement with the wedding sector as a whole, for the reasons that you said. And if you think about hospitality, can be anything from a cafe in a National Trust park through to a small nightclub or something like that. Similarly, wedding sector, as you said, is not just venues, it's florists, it's dress fitters, people working from home, people working in buildings. And so it's important to bring that forward, which is what we try and do in that focused way in the task force. But I think Secretary of State will echo the fact that despite us covering aviation, covering net zero, covering all these other sectors, I am like a bit of a stuck record when it comes to the wedding sector at the moment, to try and help you through this difficult time.
Yeah, I have to say that there's been no more eloquent advocate of the industry than Paul within government. I mean, I've been on meetings where he's very eloquently championed the cause of the wedding industry.
I mean, it's fantastic to hear that, and I also understand that within your department, it's a huge range of responsibilities that you've got there. And I guess the next question, maybe this should be more directed at you, Paul. But in terms of the way the guidelines have been sort of processed, there's obviously now a good ear with the UK Wedding Task Force. So that initial gateway into government seems secure. I think there's a big question from many people that when it gets into the sausage machine of government and it goes through all the different departments, and you speak to the lawyers, you speak to the scientists, and you end up in a situation whereby it comes back, there really ought to be a little bit more private sector involvement, I think, in the final guidelines, because some people get very confused, and it's not just the businesses, it's the suppliers and the couples who are all hanging on every word. And sometimes you read the guidelines, and I saw the latest ones with in step 2 it says that only in a purpose-built wedding venue can you get married. And it seems that we have a wedding venue here, its purpose was built for chickens, but we repurposed it for weddings. And so that lack of clarity, I think, would be solved if there was some form of input at the end of the process, even if it took an extra couple of days with the sector. And I think you would sort a lot of problems out, a lot of frustration, a lot of confusion.
No, Josh, that's fair. I mean, I've likened my job title, I've shrunk my job title to the Minister for Unintended Consequences, because as we've been going through this entire process, we found that, I used to run businesses for 25 years before I did this, and this is government working at real time, as close as you're ever going to get it to be doing. So consultations on some of this guidance has been taking place on 12 hours over a Sunday, rather than 6 months, 9 months that it usually takes. So we tried to bring in the example that you used. We wanted to make sure, because originally it looked like it was just churches, registry offices and a few other places. We wanted to make sure that dedicated wedding venues, not necessarily purpose-built, as you say, but dedicated wedding venues could indeed, there was no perverse reason that they couldn't host a ceremony indoors, but an outdoor wedding reception in stage 2.
Which is fantastic. And I think the intention is there. It's just that little bit of
I appreciate what you're saying about the specific wording, and that's trying to work at pace. And sometimes we can get ahead of ourselves because for the sausage machine that you're talking about.
Yeah, and so I think if there could be some form of engagement with say the UK Wedding Task Force on that basis, I think that would be a fantastic outcome. I guess the next question, which is not just for the wedding sector, but the entire events industry, is the question of cancellation insurance. And I'm also involved in a festival called Medicine Festival, and we've spent hours trying to work out whether we should go ahead or not go ahead. And it's all dependent on cancellation insurance. And the total events industry is worth 84 billion. And we don't want a lost summer. We think that there is a really good scheme available, which won't cost the Treasury a huge amount of money, but will give the sector the confidence that they can go ahead and carry on with these events that are in planning. You know, you've got Reading Festival, Leeds Festival, and numerous other events that have already sold tickets, got the ticket money in escrow accounts, and are really waiting for this strength and this signal from government that they can go ahead. What will you be able to do to try and ensure that we can get that over the line with the Treasury?
Well, we're working with my colleague Nigel Huddleston, who deals with events in his sort of tourism and events and hotels sector. So effectively, we split hospitality between the two of us. I do food and beverage and weddings, nightclubs, these sort of things. He does that side of it. And so this is something that has come time and time again, from rightly so. My other half's daughter has a ticket for Reading Festival, so she's incredibly keen that insurance kicks in. So we are already talking to Treasury about that, and we'll see what comes. But conversations will continue.
I think, you know, reading between the lines, there seems to be great support in DCMS, great support in your department, and obviously, you know, everybody in the private sector wants to see it to happen. But maybe it just needs a little bit more political will to get through the Treasury. And
I think it's complication as well. It's a complex issue when you get to insurance and those kind of things. So it's not something we can just sort of unfortunately just roll out very, very quickly. So you know, we'll continue the conversations. We'll see what the will is in Treasury to be able to get through that. But very much your voice is being heard.
1.5 million people. You know, it's a lot of people. And you know, the summer where the money is, and I know there's a question of debt, but where the money is in some ways is immaterial. And it may be in the pockets of government, it may be in the pockets of the people who are out there in the private sector, but it's still the same money. So I guess the question is, can we have the morale booster?
The morale booster is a really important point, Josh, because, you know, with the hospitality sector in its entirety, we're looking effectively at 3 stages. It's the reopening, so that is that roadmap and the April, May, June dates. But it's the recovery. How can we get you back to profit, and how can we get you open? But it's also the resilience and the renaissance. So you can add a 4 R's on there, and really you can have those trigger points. That what we don't want to have is points ahead of time, ahead of the science, so that we, you know, risk having the variants causing third waves or anything like that. But we do want to bring people back together for that morale boost that you're talking about, the well-being as much as the economy, because the two are. You know, are very much 2 sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Paul. And I guess turning to the science, obviously there is this events research program that's been set up, which you know, on the face of it, has all the right intentions. I think from the perspective of the wedding sector, it seems that there's not not representation on the board. And B, perhaps not quite as many wedding events as one might want to get the good science that we're going to need in order to really work out the protocols going forward. What can you do to try and improve the wedding sector's representation with the piloting?
So effectively, the scientists on SAGE and others are coming together to put forward the programme. There's again some odd consequences of this, because we are having to change the law so that we can put on mini events to be able to test it. So otherwise we would be breaking our own law if we hosted an event at this particular time. And so we then have set ourselves the challenge of making sure that we can get all of this research done throughout April so that we can report back in May. So that's a short space of time. The risk is then, you know, do we have a wedding pilot, as I've talked about in the past, and run the risk of ruining someone's day or trying to get that done in double quick time, as it were. But I think what the research program directors have decided to do is to take the component parts of various events and be able to look at how that behaviour feeds through, and then come up with a recommendation. So that will hopefully get sufficient evidence, robust enough evidence, to be able to satisfy themselves, as I know you will tell me, as you are satisfied that you can run a COVID secure a wedding, an event. You know, and you've spoken to me about this at length, and as a task force, as of a number of other people. But we've got to make sure that we've got very, very robust scientific evidence. It's been a long time since I did chemistry at university, did any sort of science, really, frankly.
I mean, the only thing that I would say on that is, when you see the guidelines, and I'm a great proponent of the idea of square meterage for all events, including weddings, as opposed to the rule of 15 or the rule of 30. And it seems that weddings have been specifically isolated as being separate and different. And so we don't want to end up in the situation whereby the ERP comes forward and says, look, we've got the research from the pilot on an outdoor music festival, and this now applies to weddings. And so it seems to me like the weddings is getting, the worst of both sides. Either we're in the same group as all the other events, which would then think, well, maybe we should have a square meterage basis for capacities, which I think would be much more sensible. Or if we are different, we should be seen separately on the piloting so that the science can actually be accurate for our.
The ERP informs the decision. It doesn't take the decision. So it doesn't work. So it won't be in isolation. If you will cite New York, for example, where it's 150 people, you will cite Scotland, where it's 50 people, and that we can take that as evidence as well in terms of that decision. I think that's important to remember in this process.
Do you think we could get somebody from the wedding sector on the ERP board?
I can certainly take that.
Well, we could take that, but what I want to stress is that if we deliver on the vaccine rollout, and all the numbers suggest that we're doing that, there is no reason why we can't reopen the economy in its entirety on the 21st of June. And that's what we're very focused on. I think the workplace guidance is really important. Obviously, the science is really important. But my message of hope is that I think we're dealing with that. I think that the metrics I've seen, the numbers, are pointing to a full open reopening on the 21st of June. And that's clearly where the Prime Minister is as well. So that's what I've said to other people in other bits of the hospitality sector, and I just want to relay that message very strongly to you today.
Can I ask, if something goes wrong, is there a plan B?
There's always a plan B. There's always a plan B, and that was why the Prime Minister was very deliberate to say that these dates are not guaranteed. When the roadmap was issued on the 22nd of February, there were essentially two lots of criticism. There was one group of people who said, this is too fast. And there was another group of people who said this is too slow. And I think that he got it just about right. And actually all the polling suggests that a majority of people thought it was just about right. But he was very keen to stress, the Prime Minister, that if the evidence changed, if the data changed, if there was a reprise or a spike in incidents, those dates would probably have to shift to the right. They'd have to be kicked further away. Now, I'm very pleased to say that there's been no data that we've seen, there's no evidence that suggests that we can't stick to those dates. Yeah. But I can't give that guarantee, as you'll appreciate, for the reasons why the Prime Minister didn't give the guarantee.
And I think it's such a tremendous achievement that we are where we are with the vaccines. And I think,
yeah, God willing, and fingers crossed, I think we're in a reasonable place.
I guess just on the plan B point, if something does delay, even worse, if we end up with say a 3 month or 4 month delay, which means we again lose the season. I mean, Paul, you'll know the drama and the stress of all the people in the sector and how that will, what the impact of that, is likely to be. And I guess there is an ask that if there is something that starts to delay that, the rollout or the reopening, that we have some ability to really come together to manage that PR and those comms.
Absolutely right.
And so having that early communication. And I think this, in a way, it comes back to the guidelines piece, which is that if the private sector can have a bit of access to the science or the scientists, right, then there is a way of being able to manage that, which is going to be in everybody's interest.
Can I just answer? I mean, very briefly, I was, as I allude to often, the energy minister before I was Secretary of State. And what happened there was that I had very, very frequent contact with the sector. We had 3 or 4 roundtables every week. And what people appreciated there was a real fluency of dialogue. They didn't always like what they heard, but what I found business people in this country are very straightforward. They appreciate straight talking and direct and clear communication. And that's something that I think Paul is going to give you, absolutely. And I'm going to be here as well to make sure that we have a very clear, transparent and frequent dialogue. And that's why both of us are here on the call.
Fantastic. Well, that's very good to hear. I know there's been a lot of talk about a hospitality minister. Can I ask when that might occur and whether weddings will end up within that sector, within that responsibility?
Well, at the moment, we've, as I say, you've got two effectively. It's only the Prime Minister that can determine sort of like ministerial positions. So what I am doing at the moment is working on a hospitality recovery strategy. So that we've got that's the 3 or 4 R's that I was talking about, whether you can count Renaissance at the end of it. So we are working as if. Effectively, you've got me as a hospitality minister, but in terms of any formal positions, that is very much something for the Prime Minister.
I think the titles are important, and I fully appreciate people's concern about that. In practice, Paul is performing, I think, a very good role, a very good function as a hospitality minister. And of course, we've got DCMS as well, DCMS colleagues who are picking up the slack. But I think, what I want to see as Secretary of State is ministers like Paul, excellent ministers, having a very good, frank dialogue with stakeholders. And I think that's what he's been doing. We've had issues from time to time in terms of leaks of meetings and things like that, which are not helpful. I'd stress that. But I think, we're hopeful that we can build on the kind of relationship we built. It was a slow start. And the last thing I'm going to say on this is that where things, I think, went slightly wrong at the end of last year was the lack of communication, a breakdown in communication, a breakdown in terms of what the government was thinking and what we were doing, and we're very determined from the Prime Minister right through the government not to do that and to learn as we have done from the lessons that we've learned.
One final question, and I know this is on the minds of many people in certainly in the wedding sector, but probably beyond, which is the ARG grants which are coming through. It's a real lifeline for businesses. I know some local authorities have been very good in getting this out, and some local authorities have been less good. And I guess the business, the BEIS department is really responsible for trying to get business off its feet and going again. What can you do, and not just with the grants actually, and I sort of extend this question into banks, because there is the issue of the recovery loan scheme and some banks which are being slow. On those two issues, what will you be able to do to ensure the efficiency of this funding, which is so vital for so many businesses?
Yeah, Josh, in terms of the banks, we're working with the British Business Bank to speak to all the banks and the banks directly to make sure that they can actually, get money out there, because that's their core business, and we want to make sure that we can get into that recovery. In terms of the grants, the additional restrictions grant, we have now the Chancellor said that it gave £425 million extra to top up that grant, but that money will come in the next few months. The local authorities have to speed up their payments to qualify for that top up. What I've said it yesterday, I've said it in the guidance as well, that we call upon local authorities to go revisit their local policies to broaden the businesses that are entitled to that ARG. And so hopefully some of the businesses that are falling between the cracks at the moment can start to get access to that money, because it's obviously this pandemic has taken longer than we anticipated right at the beginning.
And if any businesses are really struggling, would it be possible for us to get details to your department and
always possible?
Can follow that up?
Always possible. I mean, as I've said, as Secretary of State, I want to have free and fluent and clear lines of communication. So if you send something in, it should be dealt with. If it isn't dealt with, you should say, why haven't you dealt with this? And then vice versa. We will try and be very open and very clear about what we're trying to do, because I think communication has been at the center really of a good COVID response. I think where things have gone wrong, they've generally been associated with a lack of communication or poor dialogue.
Okay, well, look, fantastic, guys. Thank you very, very much for joining us. It's such useful information and really great to be able to hear from both of you.
Thank you.
So, maybe we'll be able to do this again in a couple of months' time.
I'm sure we will.
And track progress.
I'm sure we will.
Thank you very much. Emma, are you back?
We're going to have to go, I'm afraid.
They've gone.
They're back. They've gone. They've gone. Brilliant. Well done. That was great. And really interesting to hear about the clear and transparent dialogue that we're going to get going forward. So there's a commitment.
Yeah, you had it from the horse's mouth.
Yes.
Mouths.
Yes. And well done. Great line of questioning. And just for everybody listening, if anybody missed it, I think we were recording it. We are recording it because it's on this webinar live. So that will be on the collective, and some outtakes probably on other media later today. So if you missed catching up on what the Secretary of State and the Minister Paul Scully said, that will be there. But I guess the highlights, Josh, are the promise of better communication going forward. I mean, as we've talked about the detail.
Yeah, I mean, I think, clearly the two politicians who are at the top of their game have got to that place, not for being, well versed in the ability to talk around subjects. But I'm hoping that there might be progress on better communication with the sector, certainly with the guidelines. I think that would be a real win, and keep up the pressure on the cancellation insurance, because that's such a big one.
Absolutely. And insurance is a huge one. I think we made that point. You made that point very well. Okay, so I think it's time for us to wrap up. Everyone's probably hungry. It's gone 1:30. I'm just going to welcome back.
Can I just say also, sorry for not taking any questions that might have been in the chat, but it was an express request from Bays that we didn't take any questions live. So
yeah, no, understood. And actually, we did ask you for your questions over the last few days. So thanks to those that you put them in. And sorry if we didn't cover anything, but we also seem to have a commitment for them to come back in a couple of months' time and see how we're doing. So well done for getting that. So I'm just going to welcome back Ben Cowell and Judy Cale Hammond, and do stay with us, Josh, if you want. Judy Cale around, I think hopefully she may.
I can't find Judy Cale, but I think she might be under a different name. So Judy Cale, if you're here, could you put your hand up, please?
Yeah. And while we're waiting for Judy Cale, I just wanted to make one final point, that there are those surgeries going on at 2:00. So if you wanted to book in, I'm not sure how the booking's going, but if you want to book in with Kelly Chandler or Alex from Pitch Up, or Amanda from Aon, then you can do that. The links are, just log into the collective.hostology.co.uk, and the links are in the left-hand side in events, and you can click and book your session. Here's Judy Cale. Great. Hi, Judy Cale. Well, I just thought we ought to just wrap up, really. We've had 4 quite busy days over 2 weeks. And just for those of you that have attended, we managed to organise this summit in probably 4 or 5 weeks flat. So it's been a huge amount of work, both for everyone at Hostology, but also Historic Houses and CLA. And my thanks to Ben and Judy Cale for putting in some really, really great speakers. And I think, as I mentioned before, if you've missed anything, the last 4 days content is all on the collective. You have to be a venue to watch it, or a venue team member, but it's free to log in.